Question 1. Risk assessment procedures indicate a widespread service outage affecting a significant portion of Comcast's customer base, potentially linked to a cybersecurity incident. While the immediate priority is restoring service, there is a concern that customer data may have been accessed or exfiltrated during the outage. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action from a regulatory and ethical standpoint, considering U.S. federal and state data privacy laws? Option A. Initiate a rapid but thorough forensic investigation to determine the scope of any data compromise and prepare for immediate notification to affected customers and relevant regulatory bodies if a breach is confirmed, while simultaneously working on service restoration. Option B. Focus solely on restoring service as quickly as possible, deferring any investigation into data security or customer notification until after service is fully restored. Option C. Begin an internal investigation into the data security aspect, but withhold all customer and regulatory notifications until the investigation is fully concluded, regardless of potential breach confirmation. Option D. Assume no data was compromised due to the nature of the outage and proceed with service restoration without further investigation or notification. Correct answer is A. Initiate a rapid but thorough forensic investigation to determine the scope of any data compromise and prepare for immediate notification to affected customers and relevant regulatory bodies if a breach is confirmed, while simultaneously working on service restoration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for service restoration with the long-term implications of potential data breaches and regulatory noncompliance. The pressure to resolve an outage quickly can lead to shortcuts that bypass essential security protocols, creating significant risks. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the urgency of the situation does not compromise the integrity of customer data or violate Comcast obligations under relevant U.S. federal and state privacy laws, such as the Communications Act of 1934 and state-specific data breach notification laws. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach, which involves a rapid but thorough assessment of potential data exposure and immediate notification to affected parties and regulatory bodies if necessary, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of data stewardship and regulatory compliance mandated by U.S. law. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit of prompt disclosure and mitigation required by federal regulations and state laws that govern data breaches. By prioritizing a swift, yet informed, response, Comcast demonstrates a commitment to transparency and customer protection, minimizing potential harm and legal repercussions. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that prioritizes immediate service restoration without any consideration for data security or potential breaches is professionally unacceptable. This would violate ethical obligations to protect customer information and could lead to significant penalties under U.S. privacy laws, including fines and reputational damage. It demonstrates a failure to conduct a proper impact assessment, which is a fundamental component of risk management. An approach that delays notification to customers and regulatory bodies while internal investigations are ongoing, even if the intention is to gather complete information, is also professionally unacceptable. Many U.S. jurisdictions have strict timelines for data breach notification. Unreasonable delays can result in additional penalties and erode customer trust. This approach fails to acknowledge the urgency and legal requirements associated with potential data compromise. An approach that assumes no data was compromised without a proper forensic analysis is professionally unsound. This is a form of denial that bypasses due diligence. Without a thorough investigation, the company cannot confidently assert the absence of a breach, leaving it vulnerable to unforeseen consequences and regulatory scrutiny. This demonstrates a lack of professional rigor in risk assessment. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the regulatory landscape relevant to Comcast operations in the U.S. This includes familiarity with federal laws like the Communications Act and relevant state privacy statutes. When an incident occurs, the process should involve 1. Immediate containment of the incident. 2. A rapid but comprehensive impact assessment focusing on data exposure. 3. Consultation with legal and compliance teams. 4. Adherence to notification timelines and requirements. And 5. Thorough post-incident analysis and remediation. This systematic approach ensures that immediate operational needs are met without sacrificing legal and ethical responsibilities. Question 2. Operational review demonstrates that a customer service representative is handling a request to modify an existing service plan. The representative has explained the new plan's features and pricing, but has not explicitly confirmed the customer's understanding of how the changes will impact their current billing cycle or any potential early termination fees associated with their old plan. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements for consumer protection and ethical customer service? Option A. The representative should focus on highlighting the benefits of the new plan and encourage the customer to sign up quickly to take advantage of current promotions, assuming they will ask if they have questions. Option B. The representative should pause the interaction to clearly explain the implications for the billing cycle and any applicable early termination fees, and then seek the customer's explicit confirmation of understanding before proceeding. Option C. The representative should assume the customer understands the billing and fee implications, as these are standard terms often discussed during initial service setup. Option D. The representative should provide a link to the company's terms and conditions for the customer to review at their leisure, rather than detailing the specific billing and fee impacts during the call. The correct answer is B. The representative should pause the interaction to clearly explain the implications for the billing cycle and any applicable early termination fees, and then seek the customer's explicit confirmation of understanding before proceeding. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient service delivery with the imperative to comply with consumer protection regulations. Specifically, it involves understanding the nuances of how customer service representatives interact with customers regarding service changes, and ensuring these interactions are transparent and adhere to established guidelines. The challenge lies in interpreting the intent and application of these regulations in a dynamic customer service environment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing clear, accurate, and compliant communication with the customer. This aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate transparency in service offerings and changes, ensuring customers are fully informed and can make decisions based on complete information. It upholds ethical standards by treating customers with respect and honesty, preventing potential misunderstandings or deceptive practices. This approach directly addresses the spirit and letter of consumer protection laws by empowering the customer with knowledge. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach fails by assuming the customer's understanding without explicit confirmation, potentially leading to misinterpretations of service terms or charges. This violates regulations that require clear and unambiguous communication, placing the burden of understanding on the company to ensure it is conveyed effectively. Ethically, it is a failure of due diligence and customer care. Another incorrect approach prioritizes upselling or cross-selling over ensuring the customer fully understands the proposed service change. This can be seen as a deceptive practice if the primary focus distracts from essential information about the change itself, potentially violating regulations against misleading sales tactics. It erodes customer trust and can lead to complaints and regulatory scrutiny. A further incorrect approach involves providing vague or incomplete information about the service change, relying on the customer to ask clarifying questions. This shifts the responsibility of clear communication inappropriately to the customer and can contravene regulations that require proactive disclosure of material information. It is ethically questionable as it does not foster an environment of informed consent. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first thoroughly understanding the relevant consumer protection regulations and internal company policies. They should then adopt a customer-centric communication strategy that prioritizes clarity, accuracy, and completeness. This involves actively confirming customer understanding, providing all necessary details about service changes, and avoiding any communication that could be construed as misleading or deceptive. A structured approach involves 1. Identifying the core regulatory requirements. 2. Assessing the customer's current understanding. 3. Communicating information in a clear, concise, and verifiable manner. 4. Seeking explicit confirmation of understanding. 5. Documenting the interaction accurately. Question 3. The assessment process reveals that a customer is requesting to have their service account information accessed and modified by a third party who claims to have verbal authorization from the account holder. The account holder is not present to provide direct confirmation. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Comcast employee to take to ensure regulatory compliance and protect customer privacy? Option A. Deny the request immediately and inform the third party that Comcast does not allow any third-party access to account information under any circumstances. Option B. Proceed with the third party's request, assuming the verbal authorization is sufficient to maintain good customer relations and avoid potential complaints. Option C. Politely inform the customer that direct, verifiable authorization is required from the account holder, and offer to guide them through the process of providing such authorization, or escalate the request to a supervisor for further review and guidance on compliant procedures. Option D. Attempt to verify the verbal authorization by asking the third party a series of personal questions about the account holder that may not be officially documented. The correct answer is C. Politely inform the customer that direct, verifiable authorization is required from the account holder, and offer to guide them through the process of providing such authorization, or escalate the request to a supervisor for further review and guidance on compliant procedures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an employee to navigate a situation where a customer's request might inadvertently lead to a violation of Comcast's internal policies and potentially regulatory guidelines concerning data privacy and service provisioning. The employee must balance customer satisfaction with adherence to established compliance procedures, demanding careful judgment to avoid both service disruption and regulatory breaches. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to established regulatory frameworks and internal Comcast policies designed to protect customer data and ensure fair service access. By escalating the request to a supervisor or designated compliance team, the employee ensures that the situation is reviewed by individuals with the appropriate knowledge and authority to interpret and apply relevant regulations, such as those governing data privacy, e.g., FCC regulations regarding customer proprietary network information, CPNI, and service eligibility. This upholds ethical obligations to protect customer information and comply with legal mandates. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves directly fulfilling the customer's request without verification. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses necessary checks and balances, potentially leading to unauthorized access to or disclosure of customer information, which would be a direct violation of data privacy regulations and Comcast's internal security policies. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the customer's request outright without attempting to understand the underlying need or exploring compliant alternatives. This is professionally unacceptable as it can lead to poor customer service and may miss an opportunity to resolve the customer's issue within the bounds of policy and regulation. It also fails to uphold the ethical principle of treating customers with respect and seeking to assist them. A third incorrect approach is to provide a vague or misleading explanation to the customer about why the request cannot be fulfilled. This is professionally unacceptable because it erodes trust and can lead to customer frustration. It also fails to educate the customer on the importance of compliance and may not adequately address their underlying need, potentially leading to further issues. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the customer's request and its potential implications. This involves identifying any potential conflicts with internal policies or regulatory requirements. If a conflict is identified or suspected, the next step is to consult internal resources, such as supervisors or compliance departments, to ensure the correct course of action is taken. This process prioritizes compliance, ethical conduct, and customer service, ensuring that all actions are legally sound and align with company values. Question 4. The monitoring system demonstrates a significant increase in unusual login attempts from a specific IP address range, but the system's alert thresholds are not explicitly defined for this particular type of activity. Option A. Immediately block all traffic from the identified IP address range to prevent any potential breach. Option B. Investigate the nature of the unusual login attempts, correlate them with known indicators of compromise, and assess the potential impact on customer data and system integrity before determining the appropriate response. Option C. Escalate all alerts to the Security Operations Center for immediate investigation without further analysis. Option D. Ignore the alerts as the system's thresholds for this specific activity are not clearly defined, suggesting it might be a system anomaly. The correct answer is B. Investigate the nature of the unusual login attempts, correlate them with known indicators of compromise, and assess the potential impact on customer data and system integrity before determining the appropriate response. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret complex data from a monitoring system and make a judgment about potential risks without explicit, predefined thresholds for every possible anomaly. The challenge lies in discerning a genuine risk from a minor fluctuation, especially when the system is designed to detect a broad range of activities. Careful judgment is required to avoid both overreaction, leading to unnecessary resource allocation and potential disruption, and underreaction, leading to missed critical risks. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a systematic and evidence-based method for risk assessment. By identifying the specific type of anomaly, correlating it with known risk indicators, and considering the potential impact, the professional is engaging in a structured and defensible decision-making process. This aligns with regulatory expectations for proactive risk management, where organizations are required to have processes in place to identify, assess, and mitigate potential threats to their operations and customer data. This methodical approach ensures that actions taken are proportionate to the identified risk and are supported by a clear rationale, which is crucial for compliance and internal governance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the volume of alerts without understanding their nature or potential impact fails to conduct a proper risk assessment. This could lead to a boy who cried wolf scenario, where genuine threats are overlooked due to a constant barrage of false positives or low-priority alerts. This approach is professionally unacceptable as it neglects the core principle of risk assessment, understanding the likelihood and impact of an event. It also risks violating regulatory requirements that mandate a nuanced understanding of threats, not just a superficial count of system notifications. Another incorrect approach that involves immediate escalation of every alert, regardless of its severity or context, represents an inefficient and potentially disruptive response. While appearing proactive, it lacks the critical judgment needed to prioritize and allocate resources effectively. This can lead to alert fatigue among response teams and a failure to focus on the most significant threats. Ethically, it can also be seen as a misuse of resources and a failure to exercise due diligence in assessing the true nature of a potential risk before triggering a full-scale response. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a tiered approach to risk assessment. First, understand the nature of the anomaly detected by the monitoring system. Second, contextualize the anomaly by considering relevant factors such as the system being monitored, the time of day, recent changes, and known threat landscapes. Third, assess the potential impact of the anomaly if it represents a genuine threat. Finally, based on this assessment, determine the appropriate response, which could range from further investigation to immediate escalation or no action if deemed a false positive. This structured process ensures that decisions are informed, proportionate, and aligned with regulatory and ethical obligations. Question 5. The performance metrics show a significant increase in customer complaints related to intermittent internet service outages across several neighborhoods. While customer service representatives are empowered to offer service credits for each reported outage, a deeper analysis suggests these outages are linked to aging network infrastructure in those specific areas. What is the most professionally responsible and compliant course of action to address this situation? Option A. Implement a policy where customers experiencing repeated outages are offered a one-time, higher-value service credit and are encouraged to seek alternative internet providers if service issues persist. Option B. Instruct customer service representatives to proactively offer increased service credits to all affected customers, regardless of the underlying cause, to mitigate further complaints and improve customer satisfaction scores in the short term. Option C. Prioritize and expedite a comprehensive infrastructure upgrade project for the affected neighborhoods to address the root cause of the service interruptions, while continuing to offer service credits as a temporary measure for immediate customer relief. Option D. Focus on improving the efficiency of the customer service team's troubleshooting scripts to resolve issues faster, assuming that most outages are transient and will resolve themselves with minimal intervention. The correct answer is C. Prioritize and expedite a comprehensive infrastructure upgrade project for the affected neighborhoods to address the root cause of the service interruptions, while continuing to offer service credits as a temporary measure for immediate customer relief. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient service delivery with the imperative to adhere to Comcast's internal policies and relevant consumer protection regulations. The core tension lies in addressing customer dissatisfaction stemming from service interruptions, while ensuring that the proposed solutions are compliant and do not create further issues. Careful judgment is required to identify the root cause of the performance metrics, not just the symptoms, and to implement remedies that are both effective and legally sound. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough investigation into the underlying causes of the service interruptions before implementing broad solutions. This aligns with regulatory expectations that service providers proactively identify and address systemic issues that impact customer experience. By focusing on infrastructure upgrades and network stability, this approach addresses the root cause, thereby preventing future occurrences and demonstrating a commitment to reliable service, which is a key tenet of consumer protection and fair business practices. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of repeat complaints and potential regulatory scrutiny for ongoing service failures. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on offering immediate ad hoc compensation without addressing the technical issues is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the spirit of regulatory requirements that mandate the provision of reliable service. Such an approach could be seen as a superficial fix that masks underlying problems, potentially leading to repeated service failures and escalating customer frustration. From a regulatory perspective, this could be interpreted as a failure to adequately maintain service infrastructure, potentially violating service-level agreements or consumer protection laws that require reasonable service quality. Another incorrect approach that involves selectively applying troubleshooting steps based on perceived customer urgency, rather than a standardized, data-driven process, is also professionally unacceptable. This introduces bias and inconsistency into service delivery, which can lead to disparate customer experiences and potential discrimination claims. It also undermines the integrity of diagnostic processes, making it harder to identify systemic issues. Ethically, it is unfair to customers who may not be perceived as urgent, but are experiencing similar or worse service degradation. This approach risks violating regulations that mandate fair and equitable treatment of all customers. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured, data-driven approach. First, thoroughly analyze the performance metrics to identify patterns and potential root causes. Second, consult internal policies and relevant regulatory guidelines to understand the obligations and permissible actions. Third, develop a multifaceted solution that addresses both immediate customer concerns and long-term systemic improvements. Fourth, implement the solution with clear communication to all stakeholders, including customers and internal teams. Finally, continuously monitor the impact of the implemented solutions and adjust as necessary, ensuring ongoing compliance and customer satisfaction. Question 6. The assessment process reveals that a significant volume of customer interaction data, including call logs and service request details, is required for performance analysis. To expedite the analysis and identify potential system bottlenecks, the team is considering using this data in its raw form, relying on internal confidentiality agreements to protect customer privacy. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with U.S. telecommunications and data privacy regulations? Option A. Proceed with the analysis using the raw customer interaction data, as all assessment team members are bound by strict confidentiality agreements. Option B. Perform a superficial anonymization by removing only customer names, assuming this is sufficient to protect privacy for the purpose of the assessment. Option C. Prioritize the assessment's timeline by conducting the analysis with raw data and addressing de-identification requirements after the initial findings are compiled. Option D. Implement robust de-identification techniques on the customer interaction data before commencing any analysis to remove or obscure personally identifiable information. The correct answer is D. Implement robust de-identification techniques on the customer interaction data before commencing any analysis to remove or obscure personally identifiable information. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for efficient data processing with the imperative to protect customer privacy, a core tenet of telecommunications regulation in the United States. The assessment process, by its nature, often involves handling sensitive customer information. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing data handling practices that are both effective for the assessment's goals and compliant with relevant U.S. federal and state privacy laws, such as the Communications Act of 1934, as amended, and potentially state-specific data privacy statutes. A failure to adequately anonymize or de-identify data before analysis could lead to significant privacy breaches, regulatory penalties, and reputational damage for Comcast. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves implementing robust de-identification techniques before any data analysis is performed. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and privacy by design, which are implicitly or explicitly supported by U.S. telecommunications and data privacy regulations. De-identification, when done correctly, removes or obscures personally identifiable information, PI, to a degree that prevents the re-identification of individuals, thereby safeguarding privacy while still allowing for meaningful analysis of trends, performance metrics, or system vulnerabilities. This approach demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical data stewardship, which is paramount in the telecommunications industry. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to proceed with the analysis using raw, unanonymized customer data, assuming that the assessment team is bound by confidentiality agreements. This is a regulatory failure because it bypasses established data protection protocols and potentially violates the spirit, if not the letter, of privacy regulations that mandate specific safeguards for customer data, regardless of internal confidentiality agreements. Such an approach risks unauthorized disclosure or misuse of sensitive information. Another incorrect approach would be to perform a superficial anonymization that is easily reversible. For example, simply removing names while leaving other unique identifiers intact would not constitute adequate de-identification under most privacy frameworks. This is an ethical and regulatory failure because it creates a false sense of security regarding data privacy while still exposing individuals to the risk of re-identification. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting customer information. A third incorrect approach would be to delay or ignore the implementation of de-identification measures, citing project deadlines. This is a critical professional and regulatory failure. Prioritizing speed over compliance with data privacy laws is unacceptable. It indicates a disregard for legal obligations and ethical responsibilities, potentially leading to severe legal repercussions and a loss of customer trust. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive and compliance-first mindset. When faced with data that may contain PII, the default action should be to implement appropriate de-identification or anonymization techniques. This involves understanding the specific requirements of relevant U.S. privacy laws and industry best practices. A structured decision-making process would include 1. Identifying the type of data being handled and its potential for containing PII. 2. Consulting relevant internal policies and external regulatory guidelines for data handling and privacy. 3. Selecting and implementing appropriate de-identification methods that meet legal standards. 4. Verifying the effectiveness of the de-identification process. 5. Documenting all steps taken to ensure compliance and protect privacy. Question 7. Operational review demonstrates that a customer is experiencing a persistent internet service outage and is expressing significant frustration over the phone. The customer is demanding an immediate fix and is questioning the standard troubleshooting steps the Tier 1 technician is attempting to follow, suggesting they are ineffective and that a senior technician should be dispatched immediately. The Tier 1 technician has followed all initial diagnostic protocols and has gathered relevant information, but the issue remains unresolved. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Tier 1 technician? Option A. Inform the customer that the current troubleshooting steps are the only available options and that if they are unwilling to cooperate, the service call will be terminated. Option B. Explain to the customer the necessity of completing the standard troubleshooting steps to gather all diagnostic data, and if those steps do not resolve the issue, clearly outline the process for escalating to a senior technician or scheduling a field visit, managing expectations regarding timelines. Option C. Immediately escalate the call to a senior technician without completing further diagnostic steps, as the customer's frustration indicates a critical issue requiring immediate senior intervention. Option D. Promise the customer that a senior technician will be dispatched within the hour to resolve the issue, regardless of the availability of senior technicians or the outcome of further diagnostics. The correct answer is B. Explain to the customer the necessity of completing the standard troubleshooting steps to gather all diagnostic data, and if those steps do not resolve the issue, clearly outline the process for escalating to a senior technician or scheduling a field visit, managing expectations regarding timelines. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing customer service with adherence to company policy and regulatory compliance. The technician is faced with a customer who is experiencing a service outage and is demanding immediate resolution, potentially outside the standard troubleshooting procedures. The technician must exercise judgment to de-escalate the situation, provide accurate information, and ensure that any actions taken are within the scope of their authority and Comcast's operational guidelines, which are informed by FCC regulations regarding service quality and customer interaction. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves acknowledging the customer's frustration, clearly explaining the established troubleshooting steps and the reasons for them, and setting realistic expectations for resolution. This aligns with FCC regulations that require service providers to maintain adequate service and to inform customers about service issues and restoration efforts. By following established protocols, the technician ensures consistency, efficiency, and compliance with service-level agreements and regulatory mandates. This approach prioritizes accurate information dissemination and adherence to policy, which are critical for maintaining operational integrity and customer trust. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately dispatch a senior technician without following the standard tiered troubleshooting process. This bypasses established procedures, potentially leading to inefficient resource allocation and increased costs, which could indirectly impact service quality for other customers. It also fails to gather necessary diagnostic information at the initial level, which is crucial for effective problem solving and for reporting to regulatory bodies if required. Another incorrect approach would be to promise a specific resolution time that cannot be guaranteed, especially if it involves factors outside the technician's immediate control, such as network-wide issues or equipment availability. This creates unrealistic expectations and can lead to further customer dissatisfaction and potential complaints to regulatory agencies regarding misleading information. It also violates ethical principles of honesty and transparency. A third incorrect approach would be to dismiss the customer's concerns or to refuse to engage in troubleshooting because the issue is perceived as complex or outside the technician's immediate expertise, without offering alternative solutions or escalation paths. This demonstrates poor customer service and a failure to uphold the company's obligation to provide service and support, potentially leading to complaints about service denial or inadequate support, which could have regulatory implications. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first actively listening to the customer to understand the full scope of their issue and their level of frustration. Then, they should clearly and calmly explain the company's standard operating procedures and the rationale behind them, emphasizing how these procedures are designed to achieve the most efficient and effective resolution. If the standard procedures are insufficient, the professional should clearly outline the next steps for escalation or further investigation, providing realistic timelines and managing expectations. This structured approach ensures that customer needs are addressed while maintaining compliance with company policies and regulatory requirements. Question 8. The evaluation methodology shows that a customer is inquiring about a new internet service package that appears to offer a significant speed upgrade at a slightly higher monthly cost. During the sales consultation, you discover that the advertised peak speeds for this package are rarely achieved in the customer's specific neighborhood due to infrastructure limitations, a fact not prominently disclosed in the marketing materials. The customer is excited about the prospect of faster speeds for their home office. Option A. Downplay the potential speed limitations and emphasize the advertised peak speeds, hoping the customer doesn't experience significant issues and that the sale is completed. Option B. Proceed with the sale of the higher tier package, highlighting the advertised peak speeds and assuming the customer will be satisfied if they experience any improvement, regardless of the actual achievable speeds. Option C. Advise the customer to research the service's performance in their area independently before making a decision, shifting the responsibility for understanding the limitations away from the sales process. Option D. Inform the customer about the potential limitations in achieving advertised peak speeds in their area and offer alternative packages that might better suit their actual needs and budget, even if it means a lower immediate sale. The correct answer is D. Inform the customer about the potential limitations in achieving advertised peak speeds in their area and offer alternative packages that might better suit their actual needs and budget, even if it means a lower immediate sale. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between a company's immediate financial interests and its ethical obligations to its customers and the regulatory environment. The pressure to meet sales targets can incentivize employees to overlook or downplay potential issues, creating a risk of misleading customers and violating regulatory guidelines. Careful judgment is required to balance performance expectations with ethical conduct and legal compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes customer well-being and regulatory adherence over short-term sales gains. By proactively addressing the potential issue with the customer and offering a transparent solution, the employee upholds the company's integrity and avoids potential regulatory penalties. This aligns with the principles of fair dealing and consumer protection, which are fundamental in the telecommunications industry and are often codified in regulations designed to prevent deceptive practices. An incorrect approach that involves pushing the sale, despite knowing about the potential issue, fails to uphold the duty of care owed to the customer. This could be considered a deceptive practice, violating regulations that require accurate representation of services and products. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the issue and hope it doesn't arise, is negligent and demonstrates a disregard for customer satisfaction and potential future complaints, which can lead to regulatory scrutiny and reputational damage. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on the sales target without considering the customer's best interest or regulatory implications is unethical and can lead to a breach of trust. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the ethical and regulatory implications of any action. This involves considering the potential impact on the customer, the company, and the broader regulatory landscape. When faced with a conflict, prioritizing transparency, honesty, and adherence to established guidelines is crucial. Seeking guidance from supervisors or compliance departments when unsure is also a vital step in ensuring ethical and compliant conduct. Question 9. Quality control measures reveal a recurring technical glitch in a new product that, while not immediately dangerous, significantly degrades user experience and could lead to customer frustration and potential service escalations. Your sales team is under immense pressure to meet aggressive quarterly targets, and this product is a key driver of those targets. You are aware of the glitch and its potential impact. What is the most ethical and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Instruct the sales team to continue selling the product as is, focusing on its positive features and downplaying any potential user experience issues to meet sales targets. Option B. Discreetly update the product's online description to include a vague mention of potential performance variations without explicitly detailing the glitch. Option C. Suggest to the quality control team that they reevaluate their findings, implying the glitch might be an isolated incident or a minor issue not worth disrupting sales over. Option D. Immediately escalate the findings to management and the relevant product development teams, recommending a pause in sales until the glitch is resolved or a clear disclosure plan is implemented. The correct answer is D. Immediately escalate the findings to management and the relevant product development teams, recommending a pause in sales until the glitch is resolved or a clear disclosure plan is implemented. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between a company's immediate financial interests and its ethical obligations to customers and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet sales targets can incentivize employees to overlook or downplay critical information, potentially leading to customer harm and regulatory violations. The challenge lies in balancing performance metrics with integrity and adherence to established guidelines. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes customer well-being and regulatory compliance above immediate sales gains. This aligns with the ethical principles of honesty, fairness, and responsibility, which are fundamental to maintaining customer trust and the company's reputation. Specifically, it reflects adherence to consumer protection laws that mandate clear and accurate disclosure of product limitations and potential risks. By escalating the issue, the employee ensures that the company addresses the problem systematically, preventing potential harm to customers and avoiding future regulatory scrutiny. This proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to ethical business practices and long-term sustainability. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves ignoring the quality control findings to avoid impacting sales figures. This is ethically problematic as it prioritizes financial gain over customer safety and satisfaction. It also represents a failure to comply with potential disclosure requirement under consumer protection regulations, which could lead to fines and legal action. Another incorrect approach is to subtly alter the product description to obscure the identified issue without fully disclosing it. This is deceptive and unethical, as it attempts to mislead customers rather than providing them with complete and accurate information. Such an action would violate principles of transparency and could be construed as fraudulent, leading to severe regulatory penalties. A third incorrect approach is to blame the quality control team for identifying the issue, suggesting it is a minor oversight. This deflects responsibility and avoids addressing the root cause of the problem. It demonstrates a lack of accountability and a disregard for the importance of quality assurance, potentially leading to continued customer dissatisfaction and further regulatory breaches. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical and regulatory obligations. This involves understanding the potential impact on customers, the company, and regulatory bodies. The next step is to gather all relevant facts, including the findings from quality control and any applicable regulations. Then, evaluate potential courses of action against these obligations and facts, considering the short-term and long-term consequences. Prioritizing transparency, honesty, and compliance, and escalating concerns through appropriate channels are key elements of sound professional judgment. Question 10. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of customer data privacy concerns arising from the proposed new streaming service, which leverages advanced user behavior analytics. Considering Comcast's obligations under U.S. federal and state telecommunications and privacy laws, what is the most prudent initial step to take before proceeding with the service's full rollout? Option A. Proceed with the service launch, focusing on marketing and customer acquisition, and address any potential privacy issues that may arise based on customer feedback or regulatory inquiries. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of all applicable U.S. federal and state privacy regulations, FCC guidelines, and internal Comcast data handling policies to ensure the service's design and data collection practices are fully compliant, and consult with legal and compliance teams to develop specific mitigation strategies for identified privacy risks. Option C. Implement the service with existing general data privacy measures, assuming they are sufficient for this new offering, and monitor customer complaints for any privacy-related issues. Option D. Prioritize the technical development and deployment of the service to gain a competitive advantage, deferring a detailed regulatory compliance review until after the initial launch phase. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of all applicable U.S. federal and state privacy regulations, FCC guidelines, and internal Comcast data handling policies to ensure the service's design and data collection practices are fully compliant, and consult with legal and compliance teams to develop specific mitigation strategies for identified privacy risks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in a regulated industry like telecommunications, where a new service offering, while potentially beneficial to customers and the company, carries inherent risks. The challenge lies in balancing innovation and market competitiveness with the imperative to comply with all applicable regulations and protect customer data privacy. The risk matrix highlights potential negative outcomes, requiring a thoughtful and compliant approach to mitigation. The need to consider stakeholder perspectives, customers, regulators, and the company itself adds complexity, as each group may have different priorities and concerns. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough review of all relevant Comcast policies, FCC regulations, specifically regarding data privacy, service deployment, and consumer protection, and state-specific telecommunications laws. This involves engaging legal and compliance teams to ensure the new service adheres to all mandates before launch. It also necessitates proactive communication with regulatory bodies if any ambiguities or potential conflicts with existing rules are identified. This approach represents best professional practice because it embeds compliance and ethical considerations from the outset, minimizing the likelihood of regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and customer harm, demonstrates a commitment to responsible business conduct, and upholds the trust placed in Comcast by its customers and regulators. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to proceed with the service launch based solely on the potential for increased revenue and market share, assuming that any regulatory issues can be addressed post-launch. This approach fails to acknowledge the proactive compliance requirements mandated by regulatory frameworks. It risks significant fines, mandatory service disruptions, and severe reputational damage if the service is found to be non-compliant. Another incorrect approach would be to implement the service with minimal internal review, relying on the assumption that existing general privacy policies are sufficient. This overlooks the specific requirements for new service deployments and the potential for unique data handling practices that might necessitate explicit regulatory approval or specific disclosures. This can lead to violations of data privacy laws and consumer protection regulations, resulting in legal action and loss of customer trust. A third incorrect approach would be to focus exclusively on the technical feasibility and customer demand, deferring any significant regulatory or legal review until a later stage. This demonstrates a disregard for the foundational principles of regulated industries, where compliance is not an afterthought but an integral part of the development and deployment process. Such a strategy is inherently risky and unprofessional, as it prioritizes speed to market over adherence to legal and ethical obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a proactive and risk-aware approach. The decision-making process should begin with a comprehensive understanding of the regulatory landscape relevant to the specific service and jurisdiction. This involves consulting with legal, compliance, and privacy experts early in the development lifecycle. When faced with potential risks, as indicated by a risk matrix, the immediate step should be to identify and understand the applicable regulations and internal policies. The next step is to develop mitigation strategies that are not only effective in reducing the identified risks, but are also fully compliant with all legal and ethical requirements. If there is any uncertainty regarding compliance, seeking clarification from regulatory bodies or legal counsel is paramount before proceeding. This systematic approach ensures that innovation is pursued responsibly and sustainably. Question 11. Assessment of how a customer service representative should handle a situation where a customer requests a service modification that is not explicitly covered by standard operating procedures, but could potentially enhance their experience with Comcast services, while also considering the company's commitment to fair and consistent service delivery. Option A. Firmly deny the customer's request, citing that it is not part of the standard service offering and there are no exceptions. Option B. Immediately approve the customer's request to ensure a positive customer experience, assuming it is a minor deviation that will not cause significant operational issues. Option C. Make an on-the-spot decision based on personal judgment without referring to any company policies or seeking further guidance, prioritizing speed of resolution. Option D. Consult internal policy documentation, and, if necessary, escalate the request to a supervisor or relevant department for review and approval before responding to the customer, ensuring any decision aligns with company guidelines and regulatory compliance. The correct answer is D. Consult internal policy documentation and, if necessary, escalate the request to a supervisor or relevant department for review and approval before responding to the customer, ensuring any decision aligns with company guidelines and regulatory compliance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate customer satisfaction with adherence to established company policies and regulatory guidelines. The core tension lies in a customer's request that deviates from standard procedure, potentially leading to a negative customer experience if denied outright, but also risking non-compliance or setting a precedent if approved without proper justification. Careful judgment is required to navigate this, ensuring that any decision is both customer-centric and compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, policy-driven decision-making process. By first consulting internal guidelines and seeking appropriate authorization, the employee demonstrates a commitment to operational integrity and compliance. This aligns with the principles of responsible business conduct, ensuring that actions taken are within the bounds of company policy and any relevant consumer protection regulations that Comcast, as a service provider, must adhere to. It also allows for a consistent and fair application of policies across all customer interactions. An incorrect approach that involves immediately granting the customer's request without verification or escalation fails to uphold company policy and potentially bypasses necessary approval processes. This could lead to inconsistent service delivery, operational inefficiencies, and a disregard for established procedures, which may have downstream implications for billing, service provisioning, or technical support. Ethically, it could be seen as favoritism or a breach of trust with the company's operational framework. Another incorrect approach, which is to rigidly deny the request without exploring alternatives or understanding the customer's underlying need, prioritizes policy over customer service. While adhering to policy is important, a complete lack of flexibility or empathy can lead to customer dissatisfaction and churn. This approach fails to consider the spirit of customer service, which often involves finding solutions within reasonable parameters. It also misses an opportunity to identify potential gaps or areas for improvement in existing policies if the customer's request highlights a recurring issue. A further incorrect approach, which is to make an arbitrary decision without consulting any guidelines or seeking input, represents a significant failure in professional judgment and adherence to established protocols. This can lead to unpredictable outcomes, potential violations of company policy, and a lack of accountability. It undermines the importance of a standardized decision-making framework and can create confusion for both the employee and the customer. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear framework. 1. Understand the customer's request. Fully grasp what the customer is asking for and the reason behind it. 2. Consult policies and procedures. Review relevant company policies, service-level agreements, and any applicable regulatory guidelines. 3. Assess impact and risk. Evaluate the potential consequences of granting or denying the request, considering customer satisfaction, operational impact, and compliance. 4. Seek guidance/authorization. If the request falls outside standard procedures or requires an exception, consult with a supervisor or the appropriate department for approval. 5. Communicate clearly. Explain the decision to the customer, providing reasons and offering alternative solutions if the original request cannot be met. 6. Document the decision. Record the request, the decision made, and the rationale for future reference and consistency. Question 12. Comparative studies suggest that the introduction of new high-demand services can strain existing network infrastructure. Considering Comcast's commitment to service reliability and customer satisfaction, which of the following represents the most responsible approach when evaluating the deployment of a new streaming service that is projected to significantly increase bandwidth utilization? Option A. Limit the new service's availability to a small geographic area initially without a comprehensive assessment to gauge demand and potential network impact. Option B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that analyzes potential effects on network performance, customer experience for existing services, required infrastructure upgrades, and customer support readiness, using the findings to inform a phased deployment strategy. Option C. Proceed with the deployment immediately to capture market share, assuming the network can handle the initial load and address any issues reactively. Option D. Focus solely on the technical feasibility of delivering the new service, assuming that any downstream issues will be resolved by the engineering team as they arise. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the deployment immediately to capture market share, assuming the network can handle the initial load and address any issues reactively. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a new service with the potential long-term impacts on existing infrastructure and customer experience. A thorough impact assessment is crucial to identify and mitigate risks before deployment. The correct approach involves a comprehensive evaluation of the proposed service's technical, operational, and customer-facing implications. This includes assessing network capacity, potential for service degradation for existing customers, necessary upgrades, and the customer support infrastructure required. This aligns with Comcast's commitment to providing reliable service and adhering to regulatory standards that mandate service quality and consumer protection. Proactively identifying and addressing potential issues before launch demonstrates responsible operational management and upholds ethical obligations to customers. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize rapid deployment without adequate assessment. This could lead to network congestion, increased customer complaints, and potential violations of service-level agreements or regulatory requirements related to service quality. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the technical feasibility without considering the customer experience or the strain on support teams. This overlooks the ethical responsibility to ensure customers receive the service they expect and are adequately supported. Failing to conduct a thorough impact assessment can result in unforeseen costs, reputational damage, and regulatory scrutiny. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the project's objectives and scope. This should be followed by a systematic impact assessment, identifying all potential stakeholders and their concerns. Risk identification and mitigation planning are essential components. Finally, a cost-benefit analysis that includes both financial and non-financial factors, such as customer satisfaction and regulatory compliance, should inform the final decision. Question 13. Process analysis reveals that a new high-speed internet service is being developed for rapid market introduction. To ensure a successful launch and minimize disruption, what is the most comprehensive and professionally sound approach to assessing the potential impacts of this new service? Option A. Prioritize the speed of deployment by conducting a brief assessment that only addresses the most obvious potential issues, assuming that most problems will be resolved post-launch. Option B. Focus exclusively on the technical infrastructure and capabilities required for the new service, as this is the primary driver of its functionality. Option C. Conduct a thorough cross-functional impact assessment that evaluates technical feasibility, operational readiness, customer experience, financial implications, and regulatory compliance, with a focus on identifying and mitigating potential risks. Option D. Delegate the entire impact assessment process to the engineering team, as they possess the most relevant technical knowledge for evaluating new services. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough cross-functional impact assessment that evaluates technical feasibility, operational readiness, customer experience, financial implications, and regulatory compliance, with a focus on identifying and mitigating potential risks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a new service rollout with the potential for unforeseen negative impacts on existing customers and the company's reputation. The pressure to launch quickly can lead to shortcuts in the impact assessment process, potentially overlooking critical issues. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the assessment is thorough enough to identify risks without unduly delaying a beneficial service. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted impact assessment that considers various dimensions of the business and its stakeholders. This includes evaluating the technical feasibility, operational readiness, customer experience, financial implications, and regulatory compliance. By systematically analyzing these areas, the company can proactively identify potential problems, develop mitigation strategies, and ensure a smoother, more successful service launch. This aligns with best professional practices in project management and product development, emphasizing due diligence and risk management. From a regulatory perspective, a thorough impact assessment helps ensure compliance with consumer protection laws and service quality standards, preventing potential fines or reputational damage. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely focus on the technical aspects of the new service, neglecting the customer experience and operational readiness. This is professionally unacceptable because it ignores the human element and the practicalities of service delivery, potentially leading to customer dissatisfaction, increased support calls, and operational strain. It also risks violating implicit or explicit service-level agreements and consumer trust. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of deployment above all else, conducting a superficial assessment that only addresses the most obvious potential issues. This is ethically problematic, as it demonstrates a disregard for potential negative consequences for customers and the company's long-term viability. It can lead to significant unforeseen costs, regulatory scrutiny, and damage to brand reputation, failing to uphold a duty of care to stakeholders. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the entire impact assessment to a single department without cross-functional input. This is professionally unsound because it limits the scope of the assessment and can lead to blind spots. Different departments possess unique expertise and perspectives that are crucial for a holistic understanding of potential impacts. Without this collaboration, critical risks may be missed, leading to operational inefficiencies and potential compliance issues. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach impact assessments with a structured, cross-functional methodology. This involves defining clear objectives for the assessment, identifying all relevant stakeholders, and systematically evaluating potential impacts across technical, operational, customer, financial, and regulatory domains. A risk-based approach, prioritizing the assessment of high-impact and high-probability risks, is essential. Regular communication and feedback loops between departments and with senior management are crucial for ensuring that the assessment is comprehensive and that mitigation plans are effectively implemented. This systematic process fosters informed decision-making, minimizes risks, and promotes successful project outcomes. Question 14. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current risk assessment process for new technology integrations at Comcast is perceived as overly broad and time-consuming, leading to delays in deployment. While the team has identified a wide range of potential risks, there's a concern that the depth of analysis for each risk is not consistently aligned with its actual potential impact on business operations or compliance. Which of the following approaches best addresses these concerns while adhering to robust risk management principles within the U.S. regulatory context? Option A. Implement a tiered risk assessment framework that categorizes identified risks by their potential impact, e.g., high, medium, low, and likelihood, focusing detailed analysis and mitigation planning on high-impact, high-likelihood risks, while establishing clear thresholds for when lower-tier risks require further attention. Option B. Rely exclusively on historical risk data from previous technology deployments, assuming that past risk patterns are the most reliable indicators of future potential issues, and that new risk identification is less critical. Option C. Mandate that all identified risks, regardless of perceived severity, undergo the same level of in-depth analysis and documentation to ensure no potential issue is overlooked, even if it requires significant additional time and resources. Option D. Shift the primary responsibility for risk assessment to the IT department, assuming they possess the most comprehensive understanding of technological risks and can streamline the process through their specialized knowledge. The correct answer is A. Implement a tiered risk assessment framework that categorizes identified risks by their potential impact, e.g., high, medium, low, and likelihood, focusing detailed analysis and mitigation planning on high-impact, high-likelihood risks, while establishing clear thresholds for when lower-tier risks require further attention. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for proactive risk identification with the practical constraints of resource allocation and the potential for over-analysis. The Comcast hiring assessment test, operating within the U.S. regulatory framework, emphasizes a structured and documented approach to risk management. Careful judgment is needed to ensure that risk assessments are comprehensive enough to identify material risks without becoming overly burdensome or speculative. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it aligns with the principles of effective risk management as generally understood within U.S. corporate governance and compliance frameworks. It prioritizes risks based on their potential impact and likelihood, allowing for focused mitigation efforts. This systematic approach ensures that resources are directed towards the most significant threats, thereby protecting the company's interests and meeting regulatory expectations for due diligence. It also fosters a culture of continuous improvement by incorporating feedback into the risk assessment process. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on identifying every conceivable minor risk without prioritization would fail to meet the standard of effective risk management. This approach would likely lead to resource misallocation and an inability to address truly significant threats, potentially exposing the company to regulatory scrutiny for inadequate risk oversight. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on historical data without considering emerging threats would be insufficient, as it fails to account for evolving business environments and new risk landscapes, which is a critical component of a forward-looking risk assessment. A third incorrect approach that delegates risk assessment entirely to junior staff without senior oversight would be a failure of governance and could lead to incomplete or biased assessments. Lacking the strategic perspective necessary for effective risk management, professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the business objectives and the external environment. This is followed by identifying potential risks that could impact these objectives. Subsequently, risks should be analyzed and evaluated based on their likelihood and potential impact. The most critical step is then to prioritize these risks to determine which require immediate attention and mitigation strategies. Finally, the effectiveness of these strategies should be monitored and reviewed regularly, incorporating feedback to refine the entire process. This iterative and prioritized approach ensures that risk management is a dynamic and value-adding function. Question 15. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a customer has expressed general dissatisfaction with their internet service, mentioning that things just don't feel as fast as they used to. The representative needs to determine the best next step to address this feedback. Option A. Immediately schedule a technician visit to inspect the customer's equipment and wiring, assuming a technical issue is the root cause. Option B. Proactively adjust the customer service plan to a higher tier, assuming they are experiencing bandwidth limitations and would benefit from increased speed. Option C. Attempt to gather more specific details about the customer's experience, such as when the perceived slowdown occurs, what activities are affected, and if any specific devices are involved, before consulting internal troubleshooting guides and policies. Option D. Inform the customer that internet speeds can fluctuate and that their current service level meets the advertised specifications, advising them to monitor their usage. The correct answer is C. Attempt to gather more specific details about the customer's experience, such as when the perceived slowdown occurs, what activities are affected, and if any specific devices are involved, before consulting internal troubleshooting guides and policies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing customer satisfaction with adherence to Comcast's internal policies and potentially regulatory obligations regarding service provision and data privacy. The challenge lies in interpreting vague feedback and determining the appropriate course of action without overstepping boundaries or creating new service issues. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for misinterpreting customer intent, which could lead to unnecessary service calls, customer frustration, or even data security risks if not handled properly. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, policy-driven, and customer-centric resolution. By first attempting to clarify the customer's specific needs and then referencing internal documentation and policies, the representative ensures that any action taken is informed, justifiable, and aligned with Comcast's operational standards. This method also respects the customer's privacy by not making assumptions and instead seeking direct clarification. This aligns with general principles of good customer service and responsible data handling, ensuring that customer interactions are documented and addressed systematically. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately dispatching a technician without further clarification. This is professionally unacceptable because it is inefficient, potentially costly, and may not address the actual issue, leading to further customer dissatisfaction. It bypasses the necessary diagnostic steps and could be seen as a wasteful use of resources, potentially violating internal efficiency guidelines. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the feedback as subjective and take no action. This is professionally unacceptable as it fails to address a customer's expressed concern, potentially leading to churn and negative word of mouth. It demonstrates a lack of customer focus and a disregard for feedback mechanisms designed to improve service. This could also be seen as a failure to uphold service level agreements or customer care standards. A third incorrect approach is to make assumptions about the customer's needs and implement changes without confirmation. This is professionally unacceptable due to the risk of misinterpretation, leading to unintended consequences or service disruptions. It also raises privacy concerns if assumptions involve accessing or modifying customer account information without explicit consent or a clear understanding of the request. This approach lacks the diligence required for responsible customer interaction and service management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by adopting a systematic problem-solving framework. This involves active listening to understand the core of the feedback, seeking clarification to remove ambiguity, consulting relevant internal policies and documentation for guidance, and then taking appropriate, documented action. The decision-making process should always prioritize customer satisfaction, operational efficiency, and adherence to company policies and ethical standards. Question 16. The assessment process reveals that a potential customer is interested in a specific internet service promotion advertised online. The customer mentions the advertised price and a key feature of the service. However, the employee's internal system indicates that the advertised feature may not be fully available in the customer's specific geographic area, and there are additional installation fees not prominently displayed in the online advertisement. What is the most appropriate course of action for the employee to take to ensure regulatory compliance and ethical sales practices? Option A. Inform the customer about the potential limitations of the advertised feature in their area and clearly explain all associated costs, including installation fees, before proceeding with any sale. Option B. Highlight the advertised promotion and its price, while briefly mentioning that there might be minor adjustments for installation, and encourage the customer to sign up quickly before the promotion ends. Option C. Proceed with the sale as advertised, assuming the customer will be satisfied once the service is installed, and address any issues that arise later. Option D. Focus on the advertised price and feature, and only disclose the potential availability issue and additional fees if the customer specifically asks detailed questions about their service plan. The correct answer is A. Inform the customer about the potential limitations of the advertised feature in their area and clearly explain all associated costs, including installation fees, before proceeding with any sale. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an employee to navigate a situation where a potential customer's expressed interest might be influenced by information that could be considered misleading or incomplete. The challenge lies in balancing the company's sales objectives with the regulatory obligation to provide accurate and transparent information, especially concerning service availability and pricing. Misrepresenting service capabilities or pricing structures can lead to customer dissatisfaction, regulatory scrutiny, and damage to Comcast's reputation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing accurate information dissemination and adherence to regulatory guidelines. Specifically, it involves verifying the availability of the advertised service in the customer's specific location and providing clear, upfront pricing details, including any potential additional fees or promotional limitations. This aligns with Federal Communications Commission, FCC, regulations and consumer protection laws that mandate truthful advertising and fair business practices. By ensuring the customer receives accurate information before committing to a service, the employee upholds ethical standards and minimizes the risk of future disputes or complaints. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the sale based solely on the customer's stated interest in the advertised promotion, without verifying service availability. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement for accurate representation of services and could lead to a breach of contract if the service cannot be delivered as advertised. It also violates ethical principles of honesty and transparency. Another incorrect approach is to downplay or omit information about additional fees or contract terms that might affect the advertised promotional price. This constitutes deceptive advertising and violates FCC rules against misrepresenting pricing. Such an action erodes customer trust and can result in significant penalties for the company. A third incorrect approach is to pressure the customer into a decision without allowing them sufficient time to understand the service details and pricing. This can be seen as coercive and may violate consumer protection laws that grant customers the right to make informed decisions. It also fails to uphold the ethical standard of treating customers with respect and fairness. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that begins with understanding the customer's needs and then cross-referencing those needs with available, accurate product and service information. This process must include a thorough review of current promotions, service limitations, and pricing structures. When faced with a discrepancy or uncertainty, the professional should consult internal resources or supervisors to ensure compliance with all applicable regulations and company policies before providing information or making a commitment to the customer. The ultimate goal is to build trust through transparency and ensure customer satisfaction by accurately meeting their expectations. Question 17. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new AI-driven customer service chatbot could significantly reduce operational expenses. However, this chatbot will access and process customer data, including sensitive personal information, to provide personalized support. What is the most appropriate next step for Comcast to ensure regulatory compliance and ethical deployment? Option A. Rely on the vendor's assurances that their AI technology is compliant with all relevant telecommunications laws without independent verification. Option B. Proceed with the chatbot's implementation immediately to realize cost savings, assuming existing data privacy policies are sufficient to cover this new technology. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the chatbot's data handling practices against FCC regulations and the Communications Act of 1934, involving legal and compliance teams, to identify and mitigate any potential privacy or security risks before full deployment. Option D. Focus solely on the projected cost savings and market advantage, deferring any detailed regulatory review until a potential issue arises. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the chatbot's data handling practices against FCC regulations and the Communications Act of 1934, involving legal and compliance teams, to identify and mitigate any potential privacy or security risks before full deployment. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the potential benefits of a new technology with the inherent risks and regulatory obligations. The company must ensure that any implementation adheres strictly to the Communications Act of 1934, as amended, and relevant FCC regulations, particularly those concerning consumer privacy and data security. A failure to do so could result in significant fines, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, proactive assessment of regulatory compliance and potential consumer impact before deployment. This aligns with the FCC's mandate to protect consumers and ensure fair competition. By engaging legal and compliance teams early, the company demonstrates a commitment to responsible innovation and risk mitigation, which is a cornerstone of ethical business conduct in the telecommunications sector. This proactive stance helps identify and address potential issues before they escalate, thereby safeguarding the company and its customers. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cost savings without adequately considering regulatory implications would be professionally unacceptable. This would represent a failure to uphold the company's legal obligations under the Communications Act and FCC rules, potentially leading to violations of consumer privacy laws and data protection mandates. Such an approach demonstrates a disregard for compliance, risking severe penalties and undermining the company's integrity. Another incorrect approach that involves a superficial review of compliance, assuming existing policies are sufficient, is also professionally unsound. This overlooks the specific nuances of new technologies and their potential to introduce novel compliance challenges. It fails to meet the standard of due diligence required by regulatory bodies, which expect companies to actively assess and adapt their compliance frameworks to evolving technological landscapes. This can lead to unintentional violations and a lack of preparedness for regulatory scrutiny. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed to market over a comprehensive risk assessment would be ethically problematic. While market competitiveness is important, it cannot supersede the fundamental duty to comply with laws designed to protect consumers and maintain a fair marketplace. This approach risks deploying a service that may inadvertently harm consumers or violate regulations, leading to significant repercussions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multidisciplinary team, including legal, compliance, engineering, and product development. This team should conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that explicitly maps potential technological impacts against relevant regulatory requirements. A phased approach to implementation, with clear go/no-go decision points based on compliance milestones, is advisable. Continuous monitoring and adaptation of compliance strategies post-deployment are also crucial. Question 18. Consider a scenario where a customer service representative is assisting a customer with a complex billing inquiry. While reviewing the customer's account to understand the charges, the representative notices a note on the account indicating a recent service upgrade that the customer had previously mentioned to a colleague in a casual conversation. The representative, recalling the conversation, considers accessing the customer's detailed service history beyond what is immediately necessary for the billing inquiry to confirm the specifics of the upgrade and potentially offer a related service. Option A. Access the customer's detailed service history to confirm the upgrade details, then use this information to inform other customers about similar upgrade options during their calls. Option B. Access the customer's detailed service history to confirm the upgrade details and explore potential related service offerings, as this could lead to additional revenue and enhance customer satisfaction. Option C. Share the note about the service upgrade with the colleague who had the casual conversation, suggesting they follow up with the customer about the upgrade. Option D. Access only the billing information directly relevant to the customer's inquiry, and refrain from accessing any additional service history or personal notes, unless explicitly required to resolve the billing issue. The correct answer is B. Access the customer's detailed service history to confirm the upgrade details and explore potential related service offerings, as this could lead to additional revenue and enhance customer satisfaction. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to regulatory compliance in the context of customer data handling, a critical area for Comcast. The challenge lies in balancing the need to provide effective customer service with the stringent requirements of data privacy regulations. Employees must exercise careful judgment to ensure that customer information is accessed and used only for legitimate business purposes, avoiding any unauthorized disclosure or misuse. The potential for reputational damage and legal penalties underscores the importance of strict adherence to compliance protocols. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to Comcast's established data privacy policies and relevant federal regulations, such as the Communications Act and FCC rules concerning customer proprietary network information, CPNI. This means accessing customer data only when necessary to resolve a specific customer issue, documenting the access, and ensuring that no sensitive information is shared inappropriately, even with colleagues who do not have a direct need to know. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes customer privacy and data security, directly aligning with legal obligations and ethical responsibilities. It demonstrates a commitment to safeguarding sensitive information, thereby maintaining customer trust and avoiding regulatory violations. Incorrect approaches analysis. An incorrect approach would be to access a customer's account information out of curiosity or to share details about a customer's service or billing with a colleague who is not directly involved in resolving that customer's issue. This constitutes a violation of data privacy regulations and Comcast's internal policies. Specifically, it breaches the principles of least privilege and necessity, which dictate that access to sensitive information should be limited to what is strictly required for job functions. Such actions can lead to unauthorized disclosure of CPNI, resulting in significant fines from the FCC and damage to Comcast's reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that because a colleague is also an employee, they have an automatic right to access any customer information. This overlooks the specific roles and responsibilities that define authorized access to sensitive data. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Understanding the specific data privacy policies and regulations applicable to their role and the information they handle. 2. Assessing whether access to customer data is strictly necessary to perform their job duties or resolve a customer issue. 3. If access is necessary, ensuring that the access is documented and limited to the minimum required information. 4. Refraining from sharing any customer information with individuals who do not have a legitimate business need to know. 5. Seeking clarification from supervisors or compliance officers if there is any doubt about the appropriateness of accessing or sharing customer data. Question 19. The investigation demonstrates that a critical network infrastructure upgrade is scheduled for immediate implementation to enhance service capabilities. The technical team believes they have a strong understanding of the potential issues based on previous similar upgrades. However, a formal, documented risk assessment has not yet been completed for this specific upgrade, and there is pressure to proceed quickly to meet customer demand and competitive pressures. Which of the following approaches best aligns with responsible risk management and regulatory compliance in this context? Option A. Initiate the upgrade but only conduct a brief, informal review of potential technical problems, deferring any security or operational risk considerations to a later date. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive, documented risk assessment that identifies potential technical, security, and operational risks, and develop mitigation plans before proceeding with the upgrade. Option C. Postpone the upgrade indefinitely until a perfect, all-encompassing risk assessment can be performed, ensuring no possible risk remains unaddressed. Option D. Proceed with the upgrade immediately, relying on the team's experience to manage any unforeseen issues as they arise. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive, documented risk assessment that identifies potential technical, security, and operational risks, and develop mitigation plans before proceeding with the upgrade. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for rapid service delivery with the imperative to adhere to established risk assessment protocols. The pressure to meet customer demand can lead to shortcuts, potentially overlooking critical risk factors. The complexity arises from identifying and evaluating potential risks that are not immediately obvious, such as the downstream impact of a seemingly minor technical issue on customer data security or service continuity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented risk assessment process that considers the likelihood and impact of potential issues. This aligns with Comcast's commitment to operational integrity and customer trust, which are underpinned by regulatory expectations for service reliability and data protection. A thorough assessment ensures that mitigation strategies are proportionate to the identified risks, preventing potential service disruptions, security breaches, or regulatory noncompliance. This proactive stance is a cornerstone of responsible risk management in the telecommunications industry. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the service upgrade without a formal risk assessment, relying solely on the team's experience. This fails to meet regulatory requirements for documented risk management and can lead to unforeseen consequences that are more costly and damaging to address reactively. It also bypasses the opportunity to identify and mitigate risks that may not be apparent from past experience alone. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial assessment that only considers immediate technical challenges, ignoring potential impacts on customer privacy or data security. This is a significant ethical and regulatory failure, as it demonstrates a disregard for the sensitive nature of customer information and the legal obligations to protect it. Such an oversight could result in data breaches, leading to severe penalties and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach is to delay the upgrade indefinitely due to the perceived complexity of a full risk assessment, thereby failing to meet customer needs and business objectives. While thoroughness is important, an inability to adapt and implement necessary upgrades within a reasonable time frame, even with appropriate risk mitigation, can indicate a lack of efficient operational processes and a failure to balance risk with business necessity. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the scope of the activity and its potential impact. This is followed by identifying all relevant risks, assessing their likelihood and impact, and then developing and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies. The process should be documented, and the effectiveness of controls should be periodically reviewed. In situations of time pressure, it is crucial to prioritize risks and focus mitigation efforts on the most critical areas, rather than abandoning the assessment process or making arbitrary decisions. Question 20. Upon reviewing the proposed launch of a new streaming service feature, what is the most effective approach to identifying potential risks and vulnerabilities, given that comprehensive quantitative data on its performance is not yet available? Option A. Analyze historical performance data from previously launched but dissimilar streaming features. Option B. Conduct a cross-functional brainstorming session with engineering, customer support, and marketing teams to identify potential failure points and unintended consequences. Option C. Rely exclusively on the technical specifications and design documents provided by the engineering team. Option D. Implement the feature and address any issues that arise based on customer feedback and complaint logs. Correct answer is B. Conduct a cross-functional brainstorming session with engineering, customer support, and marketing teams to identify potential failure points and unintended consequences. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in risk assessment by requiring the identification of potential vulnerabilities in a new product launch without relying on quantitative data. Challenge lies in moving beyond simple checklists to a more nuanced understanding of how a new service might interact with existing systems and customer behaviors, potentially leading to unforeseen issues. Careful judgment is required to anticipate risks that are not immediately obvious or easily quantifiable. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively engaging with various stakeholders, including engineering, customer support, and marketing, to brainstorm potential failure points and unintended consequences. This collaborative method leverages diverse perspectives and domain expertise to identify risks that might be missed by a single individual or a purely technical review. This aligns with best professional practice by fostering a comprehensive understanding of the product's lifecycle and its potential impact, adhering to principles of due diligence and responsible innovation. It anticipates potential issues before they manifest, which is a core tenet of effective risk management and customer protection, implicitly supported by regulatory expectations for service providers to ensure reliability and security. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on documented technical specifications. This fails to account for real-world usage, human error, or emergent issues that are not captured in design documents. It represents a regulatory and ethical failure by neglecting the practical application of the product and its potential to cause harm or disruption to customers, thereby not meeting the standard of care expected in service delivery. Another incorrect approach relies on historical data from similar, but not identical, products. While historical data can be a useful starting point, it is insufficient on its own. Differences in technology, market conditions, or customer base can render past risk assessments obsolete. This approach is professionally deficient because it assumes a level of equivalence that may not exist, potentially leading to overlooked unique risks associated with the new product, which could violate principles of thoroughness and due diligence. A third incorrect approach involves waiting for customer complaints to identify risks. This reactive stance is fundamentally flawed in risk assessment. It prioritizes damage control over proactive prevention, which is a significant regulatory and ethical failing. It demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for customer experience and potential service disruptions, which can have legal and reputational consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a multifaceted risk assessment strategy that combines technical review with stakeholder engagement and scenario planning. The process should begin with understanding the product's intended function, and then systematically exploring how it might fail, considering both technical and human factors. Engaging with teams who have direct customer interaction or deep technical knowledge is crucial for uncovering latent risks. A proactive, collaborative, and forward-looking approach is essential for effective risk management and upholding professional responsibilities.